Welcome to Inside the Arena, your source for everything off the ice, off the court, and outside the field of play. With your hosts, KOMO Sports Director Niko Tamurian and KOMO Senior Reporter Chris Daniels.
Bringing the Sonics back. Got Chris Daniels' attention over there when I said that. Chris, that's all I'm giving you right now. It's just a teaser, Chris.
Oh, Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell in his State of the City address. He loves to talk about the Sonics, and we do here inside the arena as well. Niko, we are back with the smooth voice of David Lee there also tipping things off.
It's like we're about to enter the court like they were like in those video opens for the 90s NBA. It's like, I want to go play some basketball now.
I feel like I'm back in Key Arena in 1995.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful.
Hey, this is a show inside the arena that we have started here to really talk about the issues off the ice, off the court, off the field of play. We're going to be talking a lot about the return of the Sonics, not only in this episode, but in the weeks ahead, as well as NIL, realignment, TV digital rights deals, construction projects. Think the business of sports, philanthropic efforts, context you cannot get anywhere else except from Niko and myself. We're going to be doing this every week, and we're going to be talking a lot about the Sonic story this week, what we heard from NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, what he did and did not say. You're also going to hear from the Hall of Famer, Gary Payton. We're also going to talk about the UW and WSU athletic programs, the uncertainty surrounding them. But first, let's touch all the bases. We call this Four Corners. Go around the bases, tell you what's good, what is bad in local sports. Niko, what do you like?
Well, and first and foremost, when you're talking about this show and why it's important to do this right now, it's because Seattle sports is really at a crossroads. There's a lot of big events that are going to be happening that are already unfolding. And certainly first and foremost would be the hopeful return of the Sonics. But there's a lot of things happening across our pro sports and college sports. And that's my first base, the positivity here. Last week, I talked about the Mariners and how they bounced back from that rough off season where you fall one game short of the postseason, and certainly your president of baseball ops has some comments. There was a great stat. It just didn't quite land at the right time. And I said how they recovered from that. Okay. Now I want to take that a step further because everything you and I are hearing is that this team is all in. And what I mean by that is they're going to make a big move before the trade deadline. Now we could dive into the X's and O's and say, oh, you can just look at it. Basically, they need some offensive help. Okay. But why it's so important that they're trying to win now. And listen, the goal is to always win now. But I mean, you have this first place standing, and to make an all-in kind of move, bring in a big bat, bring in a big name, you're going to, really rejuvenate this fan base to a whole new level. And right now is a critical juncture for this team. It would behoove them to get to their whatever all-time high could be at this point. Team that still hasn't won a World Series. Now, that'd be crazy to predict that sort of thing. But I'm just saying, there's some uncertainty when it comes to their future in TV. And it's not just because of the Mariners or Root Sports or anything. Root Sports does an amazing job. It's the idea that, as you and I talk about, the RSN model is changing. And from that standpoint, the Mariners have some things to figure out what happens in that future. A lot of baseball teams do. It's not just a Mariners thing. And so the Mariners going in all in right now, quelling those fans that say, oh, this team doesn't spend. Well, look what they're about to do. I genuinely believe that. By making that kind of move at this juncture in the franchise, that's a huge deal going forward for whatever that future in TV might be.
And what people may not realize who are Mariners fans who don't follow this like we do is that Warner Brothers Discovery, the conglomerate, was part of Root Sports, sold off their stake in Root Sports, and now the Mariners own 100% of that network. So they are conceivably losing money. They're losing the Kraken. Their finances are all over the place, and so that does factor into the trade deadline. I think it's going to be interesting to see what players like the Big Dumper have to say about this, who's quickly established himself in a couple of years as a clubhouse leader and somebody who has not been afraid to speak their mind. And we know that just this week, as we're recording this, he's had a couple of great late game heroics, hitting the ball out of the yard, the walk-off grand slam, and they're promoting the heck out of him. He is going to be a guy that I think is going to be one to watch as we enter this whole discussion.
Did you see the giveaway from the Mariners this week?
Big Dumper.
Seat cushions.
Kudos to the marketing department that continues to come up with great and somewhat offbeat ideas. A Big Dumper seat cushion. Second week in a row, I will go to second here and talk about the Storm in the WNBA. I think there's more good news there. The first month of the season drew the highest attendance for the league since 1998. the best television ratings in history. They're averaging 1.32 million viewers, tripling last year's mark. Arenas are at a 94% capacity. And hey, the Storm have officially an Olympian again, Jewel Lloyd, named by USA Basketball to the team that will play in Paris.
And certainly the numbers you're referring to, Caitlin Clark effect, right? But from the Storm perspective, it's similar to what I was talking about with the Mariners a minute ago. I mean, they hit this new era. No more Sue Bird, no more Brianna Stewart. And last year, a little bit rough. But they reloaded. They, got Skylar Diggins-Smith. They traded for Nneka Ogwumike to join Jewel Lloyd. And suddenly this team is fighting for first place. They look great. And it's what that investment can do. And so kudos to the Storm. And it's early, but let's see what they can do here.
What don't you like?
Oh boy, this is something that my closest friends know. I rant about often. And this is one of those things they might have like blink the red light in the studio, so I shut up about it. But when it comes to conference realignment, and we've seen so much of it in recent years, and it's nothing new. I mean, the conference realignment's been going on forever. And what made me think about talking about it today, I was reading an article about how Texas has really, because of conference realignment essentially, killed two conferences, Southwest Conference back in the 90s, and of course the Big 12 as they jump to the SEC. The Big 12 is surviving in part by rating the Pac-12, but there's just, it trickles down. But here's what I want to rant about with this. And you know this, but we talk about it.
Yeah.
You see it. We hear things and then we see opposites on social media. Like, no, that's not accurate. But about 90% of the stuff you see on social media, especially when it comes to conference realignment, especially Twitter, X being kind of a sports thing for that, it's one of two things. It's either a writer or a reporter of some kind, or maybe not even that, throwing something against the wall for clicks and likes. It's not true, but it's going to get a lot of action on there, right? The other one is schools that have an agenda of some kind. Agenda doesn't have to be a bad word. It's just they have a goal and they sort of leak it through somebody. And that person puts it out there. Oh, I've got this high ranking source in Florida State, or what I'm using Florida State and trying to get out of the ACC right now as an example. And what's being put out there is just what the school wants out there. Now, all that it happens all the time. The problem with it becomes, as we've seen, especially in the last year, I genuinely believe a lot of college presidents out there, they read this stuff and they take it as fact. And instead of okay, hold on, let's take a beat here. Let's think about this. Let's think about the solution here. But in reality, you're seeing a lot of stuff, and we saw this with the Pac-12 stuff last year, and we've seen it in other leagues in years past. It's just conjecture, or it's targeted leaked information. And yet these college presidents, and to a lesser extent ADs, are seeing this, and they're starting to worry, and they're starting to say, well, what should we do? Oh gosh, should we think about jumping this? And it just creates chaos. And in my opinion, a lot of the times it is often based on targeted leaked information or just stuff that's out there. And to me, it's insanity.
So you're saying you don't think Wildcat Fan 25 on Twitter knows all the information?
No, but I think a lot of administrators, and I'm not necessarily saying here locally, but just in covering what happened in the Pac-12, and in another lifetime, I covered the demise of the Big East. And I know that those folks were reading that sort of thing. And I'm like, no, this isn't. Don't.
We know a lot of people in Big 12 country were definitely reading it, and I think time will be a guide here on Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and to a lesser extent Washington and Oregon, how much they were moved to make a move based on some of the social media conversation. And that leads me, as we finish going around the corner to talk about UW and some real talk here. Football season, I mean, you covered it all the way through, Niko, right. Was great. And then the wheels on the purple and gold bus hit some speed bumps. And we're not just talking about football. There have been softball team defections. And now this reporting from Christian Capel of On Montlake. He's a longtime reporter who has covered Washington State and the University of Washington, did it at the Athletic before he went to On Montlake. He says UW has a $30 million cash flow deficit and is not only taking loans from the Big Ten and Fox, but the athletic department will ask the Board of Regents at the University of Washington for help. He writes, while the department projects record revenue and a relatively modest operating deficit of a little more than $2 million for the 2025 fiscal year ending June 30th of 25, capital expenditures related to joining the Big Ten, plus the annual debt service payment on the loans that funded the renovation of Husky Stadium and Husky Ballpark, necessitate external and campus assistance. Objectively, one has to wonder why UW President Anamari Kase has not received more criticism here in the last year. Full disclosure, As we are recording this, she's already announced that she will be departing in 2025. We did hear from one professor, Cliff Mass, without getting too political in this podcast, who said that she was responsible for a moral, ethical, and legal failure in the handling of the pro-Palestinian protests, and she refused to talk about any of that as it was going on. There's also been some reporting in the Seattle Times about what she was telling different parties in the breakup of the Pac-10, and then jumping to the Big Ten with a half share. Then she hired an athletic director in Troy Dannon, who left 5 months later. She allowed Kalen DeBoer to leave. There have been union issues on campus, fiscal issues on campus, football fans who are like, hey, this is going to be the greatest thing to move to the Big Ten. They're going to be watching Peacock to see the Apple Cup on TV, and there's going to be Friday night games that'll create some head-to-head problems for high school football fans in our region. So there's a lot of things going on at the University of Washington that are not necessarily great after this great football season that they just had, and a pretty good softball season as well.
Yeah, and you look at that football season, and to me, that was a big opportunity, and maybe it still is. We'll see what Jed Fish does without getting too deep into the X's and O's here. But to me, and this is something I mentioned last week, I mean, you had this great, momentum building season, and yet now you're jumping into this Big Ten and a year where you're losing all these stars at top of your list, Michael Penix Jr., Rome Odunze, etc. It's going to be a really unique dynamic with everything you just mentioned, with financial woes maybe there, and you're going to this league, you're into this whole new world, and you're doing it with a lot of uncertainty, maybe off the field as well.
And Washington State is also going.
And that's just, I mean, and they're a byproduct of all this. Like, Cougs didn't do anything wrong. They're just, and suddenly they're left out in the cold, so to speak. But they're charging their path forward. Quick fun story here, and I know you know this. My brother lives in upstate New York, 3,000 miles from us, but he loves college sports, and he has the same notion that a lot of college sports fans out there, they feel for the Cougs. They're like, what do these guys do? So he's literally flying across the country not to see his brother. I mean, I guess I'm a part of that. But he wants to go to the Apple Cup, and he's wearing a Coug shirt, and so is his buddy. And I'm like, it's interesting to see how the college sports world has really rallied behind Washington State, and certainly Oregon State as well. But it's really going to be unique to see how they handle all this. And it's certainly, they have a new TV deal. They have all sorts of new things. And that's why we were thrilled to catch up with their interim AD, Ann McCoy. Certainly charged with navigating this. And you hear me say interim because Pat Chun went to UW. And so everything is just in flux with those two schools. And yet out of all the chaos, there seems to be, she used the term you'll see in a second, the dust settled, but there seems to be a little bit of stability, a little bit of wait and see. Let's hear what Ann McCoy has to say. It's going to be a really interesting time for the Cougs. Joined now by WSU Interim Athletic Director Ann McCoy. Thanks for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And let's start with being an Interim Athletic Director.
Yes.
In these most uncertain times in college sports and this wild transition that you're going through in Pullman right now. I just want to ask what this has been like in this time of transition, and certainly as we adjust to what, at least for this year, will be a new normal in college sports.
Right. No, it has been kind of a wild year. I've actually been at Washington State about 23 years, and this by far goes down as the most kind of tumultuous, wild, never know what's around the corner. But to be honest, I think now with the dust settling a little and we're in a really great place to just evaluate what the future does look like, and a landing spot for the next 2 years for all of our programs, and just the ability to sit back and evaluate for a minute about just what's the best option, what does our future look like, I think has been really good with where we're at right now.
And that's exactly what I was going to ask for the next question. Great minds think alike here. The dust is settling, and it's this time for WSU to put itself in the best position possible for whatever may come in the future, or just being where you are right now.
Right.
And again, in this new normal and this new schedule and this new tier arrangement, how do you try and make that happen, put yourself in the best position possible for that institution?
Sure. I think a couple things are really important. I think first is just to remember who we are. What has always made Washington State University really special, different, but full of much pride for Cougar Nation. And I think remembering, what makes us tick like that, to then leave no stone left unturned and really evaluate what the best options are going to be. And to be patient. Like, it's really hard right now with the uncertainty of wanting to just settle things. And I think the fact that right now all of our programs are in a conference spot, have their schedules, are ready to go, and are ready to turn the page for a new fall, quite honestly, after the fall of 23, and just really, being patient. And I think evaluating all of those things, but with the core principles of who we are and what's important to Washington State.
It seems like over the last year and a half, there have been a lot of questions about what does this mean now for Washington State? and that's talking about settlements with the NCAA. It's talking about settlements with the Pac-12. First of all, with that Pac-12 settlement with the rest of the member schools, what did that allow Washington State to do coming into this next sports season?
Sure. I think honestly it bought us some time, because with some financial uncertainty, it allowed us to really project more what our revenues would be like, both conference distribution, but also expenses from a conference standpoint and where we would be traveling and all of those sorts of things. It was a really important first piece to then take advantage of that settling dust to really then evaluate where we want to be. So more than anything, it bought us time to really remain competitive and highly productive as a Power 5 school, which is still how we think of ourselves.
As far as the NCAA settlement, this 10-year couple billion settlement, there's already questions about, well, what does this mean for Title IX and access for women's programs, and will every school spend $21 million a year? How have you looked at that thus far as how that's going to work for Washington State?
I think that's a really important question and a really interesting proposition that every school is going to have going forward. I think right now, with all of the uncertainty, we need to decide, once we know more answers, of what does that look like? What could we actually provide? What will we prioritize as a university to spend monies on in that vein? But the Title IX implications are very real, and something that we will continue to have at the forefront of our mind, as we do with any spending decisions and any student athlete benefit questions. Like, we try to keep all of our sports, regardless of which sport it is or which gender participates, to really make sure all of our student athletes have the opportunity to access those benefits.
One thing you mentioned a minute ago that I want to talk about is everything seems to be in order this year because those schedules are in place. Can I just ask how crazy it was to try and arrange those schedules and all this?
Yeah, we had a lot of good partnerships with the Pac-12 folks and then the WCC and the Mountain West to really make sure every sport landed in a good spot. But the uncertainty for our coaches and our student athletes was really difficult. They are folks that find out what they need to work on, they tackle it, and they move forward. And there was this period of flux where they couldn't even really imagine which schools we'd be competing against. And so it was important to really look at keeping a West Coast presence of that, being a high-level West Coast brand that now will be seen nationally, which I'm sure we'll touch on in a minute. But
we are.
Yes, but I think it's just been really, really important. I mean, I can't overemphasize how important it was to really have those conference partnerships set, so that we have the ability to compete for championships, to compete for automatic qualifiers for postseason, to have bowl agreements, and all those sorts of things that are really important.
And you mentioned that TV distribution. Certainly, we're excited because
so
CW here in Seattle, that's us
Yes,
now.
yes.
6 Cougar home games. We're excited about that. But in general, I mean, you look at that CW network, and boy, oh boy, that's a wide distribution. That's wider than I would venture to guess a lot of the conferences out there.
No, I agree. The partnership with the CW network has just been amazing. I mean, the coverage that the university will get in our programs and our student athletes to really spread the Cougar love literally in every home in the country, if we, people will tune on, I think is great. And we want them to see Washington State, we want them to see Oregon State, and they will be able to see us, they'll be able to find us and watch us, and it is so exciting.
How did you prioritize that when trying to figure this out? And also going forward with basketball, other sports, there's a huge unknown with television distribution there.
We're still going to continue to work with the Pac-12. The Pac-12 networks has now become Pac-12 enterprises and are really going to be wide-reaching and still be a tremendous resource and asset for Washington State University, and helping, with production, with, potentially looking at various distribution models. But we will feed into with the WCC and the Mountain West and the sports that are competing in those programs, in those conferences, we'll feed into their arrangements, but then also augment and amplify that to as much as we can. But for football, it was game changing.
I'm curious, the decision to kind of piecemeal this together versus say, hey, let's go be an affiliate member of the Mountain West Conference in all sports. Why go kind of at this piecemeal with the different schools in different regions?
Yeah, I think as with any time when there's change, really evaluating what the possible landing spots are and what those look like, and we really felt like the ability to have almost all of our sports in the WCC, with schools that we traditionally compete against, albeit in a non-conference setting previously, was really important. And I think the way the need was for the WCC and the interest level to be in a broader range of programs or sports in this case was really important. And so leaving baseball and swimming initially as sports that we would not be in the WCC with, but then the Mountain West being like, we're really excited to have these two sports in the conference and to have Washington State join us in these two sports. So it really, after a lot of conversation and evaluating the options, it just seemed to be the best that was going to work out with kind of where we wanted to land with all of our sports.
Yeah, so you're creative these days, I take it, right?
You do, very creative. You really have to reimagine what college athletics looks like, and in our case right now with Washington State University and what that looks like, and be creative and be willing to, not look at just how things always were, but where could they, what could they look like?
Winter, Mady, and McCoy, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, I really appreciate the candor and kind of taking us behind the scenes. We'll wait and see how things look a couple years from now, but given the hand they were dealt, I think they've done a nice job.
Interesting that they're going to have more eyeballs on the CW network than on the Pac-12 network. But there is a question, I think, whether fans in, say, West Virginia are going to want to watch the Washington State-Hawaii game at 10 o'clock Eastern time. So I think that's one of the big questions for Washington State going forward.
At least they have the option to.
Yes, at least they have the option. And, speaking of eyeballs, there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on the NBA and everything that comes out of Adam Silver's mouth. This is our Supersonic Minute, which is going to be way longer than a minute during this show. We're going to talk the rest of the show about the return potentially of the NBA, the buzz building that we are getting very close to talking about expansion in the NBA and Seattle being the prime target for the league. And we did hear in this last week from NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, who addressed reporters and inched the ball closer to the end line, so to speak. Here's what he had to tell reporters.
In all seriousness, that I meant what I said. We do need to finish up. I think I said a few years ago, collective bargaining agreement, new media deals, then we would turn to expansion. So we got part one done clearly. And thank you to the Players Association. We're very happy. I think both sides are with our new collective bargaining agreement. Media deals, it's been a long process. It's ongoing, and we hope to wrap it up, in the relative near term. And then we will turn to expansion. But by turning to expansion, it doesn't mean that we're going to announce that now we're ready to add teams. It means that there'll be a committee of NBA governors that will focus on it. There's clearly markets out there that are very interested, and we'll run through a process. But I actually am looking forward to that. I think that the league, it's not preordained that we will expand this time, but I know there's an enormous amount of interest out there. And to me, yes, there are wealthy individuals, institutions that would like to invest and buy NBA teams, but I think it's on the league to look holistically, because there's the dilution, of course. Let's just say we expand by 2 teams. What does that mean for talent? I feel great about where the talent is right now in the league, but those players have to come from somewhere. If you add 2 teams, how does it work geographically? What will it mean for growing the game? At some point, we'd like to look outside the United States in addition to Canada. This may not be the right moment to do that, but I'm thinking long-term as well. So I'm actually very excited about turning to that process, but first we just got to be finished with the media deals.
And that media deal is supposed to be done here perhaps in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and it's just a really exciting time when you look at all that. Now, here's the other thing, Chris. He was asked about NBC Sports Boston, giving us a sneak. He was asked if he can give a sneak peek, and immediately said there's been some discussion. And this is the part that really perked our ears up. We were texting as soon as he said it about going back to Seattle, potentially, Vegas, no doubt, and one day, keyword, he said one day, to Mexico City. Let's take, it's just really interesting to hear him say those sorts of things.
Yeah, let's take a listen. This is courtesy of NBC Sports Boston, Adam Silver.
A lot of chatter about, new TV contract as well as expansion. How do those kind of go hand in hand as you look towards the future of the league?
I mean, where they go hand in hand is we've been saying for a while, we have to understand what our long-term media relationships are before we look to expansion. We're in the process of wrapping up those deals now. They're going to be long-term deals. I'm hopefully we're not done yet, but they'll be successful in terms of generating more money for the league and the teams. And then we'll be in a position to look at expansion. And I think that it's a 30-team league right now. It's not preordained that we'll expand. I've said it before. You got to look at the dilution potentially of talent, but there's so much great basketball we've played around the world. I don't think there's any doubt that over time this league can sustain 2 more teams. Lots of interested markets. So once we finish our media deals, we'll turn our attention to that.
Can you give us a sneak peek? Just what will be the okay? It's these, and these, and I could pick up the tea leaves.
Well, there's been some discussion about going back to Seattle potentially. Las Vegas, no doubt, is very interested in the team. Mexico City one day. But there's lots of other U.S. cities and Canadian cities, frankly, that have reached out to us to tell us they'd be interested.
Adam Silver is a smart person.
He is.
He's got a law degree. You have to listen to what he says carefully. He learned a lot from David Stern as well. He mentioned the expansion committee and was very careful in his words there, mentioning Seattle and Vegas, and one day Mexico City.
That was the key word. And I think it's important to note that because you and I have both seen graphics out there on social media from, big outlets saying, hey, the NBA is looking at Mexico City, Seattle, and Vegas. Well, that's not exactly what he said. But to me, and I'm sure many people out there, what really jumps out is the fact that he just offered up Seattle. It's not like the reporters from that, great crew at NBC Sports Boston were saying, what about Seattle? What about, he said going back to Seattle. And that just gave me butterflies to hear it. It's just really exciting to hear that sort of thing.
And thanks again to our friends at NBC Sports Boston. You also have a friend in the glove, the Hall of Famer, Gary Payton. You talked to him immediately after Silver made those comments.
Well, first of all, for a kid who grew up on the other coast wearing a Gary Payton jersey and getting flack from East Coast basketball fans, it's always cool to talk to him. But this is the second time we've been able to talk in the last month. And what was cool about it is that first clip we saw from Adam Silver before game one of the finals, that the press conference setting there, that occurs. And then about 15, 20 minutes later, I'm talking with Gary Payton about it. And Gary and all the former Sonics are so excited to hear this sort of thing. So just present it to you that way. Here's what Gary had to say just a few minutes after that announcement. And I want to talk one NBA thing with you because just a little while ago, Adam Silver held this press conference and he said exactly what you told me last month, which is that they want to work out this TV deal. And then as soon as that's done, then they're looking to expansion. He said they're going to form a committee, board of governors, all that good stuff. When you hear that, what is kind of your reaction? Are you excited to hear that, okay, they're staying to that timeline? Just what your general reaction to that?
Well, I know everything that's going on. So, I just know that he's got to do the political thing. Like I said, I've been telling everybody Adam Silver is a great commissioner. He took over after David Stern. David Stern taught him the way, and he knows what is need to be done. Seattle never should have lost their team. We should have never lost our team in the first place. He knows that we want a team back. We've been fighting for a long time now. It's going on 14-something years or 17 years almost, you know what I'm saying? So we need to get back, and I think that's what's going to happen. And he just got to do it, political. He's got to understand it. Then they got to get everything in the pieces together. And I'm glad to hear that it's finally now coming about, that it's coming from his mouth so people can get a little excited and they can get motivated. Because I know if the basketball comes back here, which it is, I know we're going to have a great team and we're going to have great fan support. And that's what it's going to be. And I'll be here almost every day. You know what I'm saying? So it'll be great.
And I'm going to see you on opening night. I'm going to hold you to that.
Absolutely. All right.
Gary Payton, I appreciate you, sir.
Thank you. Much. All right.
Thank you. I am going to hold him to that. First Sonics game. Gary Payton live on KOMO News.
Well, and it sounds like, again, let's sum up all of what we just heard, that there still is TV digital rights deal, $76 billion that we're talking about between ESPN, Amazon, and likely some combination of NBC, TBS, TNT, Turner Sports. So once that gets signed off on, you heard it directly from the commissioner. And that was new, to say, we're not going to expand right that second. We're going to form an expansion committee with owners, probably 5 different owners or more on a committee who will talk about which cities to expand to. And then you heard in that clip from NBC Sports, Seattle is the first city that he mentioned. So we're looking at potentially what could be a really interesting, say, 6 months or so ahead of us inside the arena.
I like that. You know what time it is?
It's time for the final buzzer, isn't it?
Let's do it. I want to say something for the final buzzer here. And I'm not going to sing. I don't have the tones of the Axl Rose, but I say, just need a little patience. Just a little. Okay, I'm going to stop. But the idea, here's my thing. Okay. Yeah, and you led right into it. Great minds think alike. Is, okay, just because the TV deal is going to be done, let's say it's done in a month from now. It may not even be that long, of course. And it may not, and certainly expansion is not going to happen that second. It's not like 4th of July, Sonics are back. No, it's going to take some time. That's why I want to preach a little bit of patience, because you heard Gary Payton say it, and he's spot on with this. It's going to be a process that even if the commissioner is going to offer up Seattle and Vegas, they're still going to give the opportunities for cities to make their pitch. Do I believe the Louisvilles and Kansas Cities of the world have a stronger pitch than the Seattles and Vegases? Of course not. But they're They're business people. They're going to listen, right? This is going to take time. Be patient. And it goes back to what I was saying about conference realignment. Careful about what you see in this process. Do not believe it until you hear from the commissioner. You remember a couple years ago, there was the NBA expansion, or excuse me, the exhibition game here at Climate Pledge. I think that was the Blazers Clippers one. And the AP, reliable as it comes in media. And one of their folks said, oh yeah, bet these exhibition games tonight because there was one in Vegas the same night. You're going to hear about expansion to Vegas and Seattle. Well, that didn't happen. And you and I knew it wasn't happening. We were, plugged into that sort of thing. So that's why I want to tell all our listeners and all our viewers, first of all, thank you. Secondly, a little patience. It's been 16 long years. Another 6 months isn't going to hurt. I think we have a happy ending to this.
Well, and as the late David Stern once said, life is a negotiation. And when you hear Adam Silver say things like Mexico City, Montreal, Vancouver, that's some negotiation, external negotiation to try and get the price up. I want to end with this, with our final buzzer. Thanks to all of you who, after the first week, gave us feedback, sent direct messages, tweets, talking about ideas, things that you'd like to hear us get into. I just wanted to say thanks to longtime follower Robert Cardona, who pinged me on X. He listened to what I said last week about the Sounders, and he followed up and said he theorizes the correlation between attendance at Lumen Field for Sounders games is tied to the league's decision, MLS, to put matches on Apple TV and off local over-the-air television. A great theory. He may be onto something. That may be a topic for us to talk about in the next weeks to come.
I agree with him, and I think more pro sports are going to go that route.
Love the feedback. Love being with you, Niko. We took people inside the arena. Once again, should we let David Lee take us out?
Take us out, David.
You've been listening to Inside the Arena with Niko and Chris. Please subscribe on your favorite platform. Until next time.